Super quick video comparing the Hasselblad X2DII to the Fujifilm GFX 100II. So, to start out this battle of the titans between these two bad boys, I'm going to put a bunch of sample photos right up front, you know what I mean? I'll put camera A and camera B, and you can look at them, and at the end of the video, I'll let you know which one was camera A and which one was camera B. If you've watched my channel in the past, you know that I've been using the Fujifilm GFX 100II as my daily driver workhorse camera, you know, in the studio, doing, you know, more serious video projects with this bad boy. You know, rigging the camera up, and I've got a whole video coming out about the rig I use with the monitor and like the D-tap adapter and V-mount battery and all that stuff. That's coming. I use this camera for all of that kind of stuff as well as in-studio photography and event and sports photography. But if you're a really hardcore viewer of this channel, you'll know that prior to using the Fujifilm GFX 100II, for my in-studio stuff, I use the Hasselblad H6D100 and the Hasselblad series of cameras, the V-mount, I believe, cameras, which is like true medium format, true large format, medium format sensor digital photography. But that camera system got discontinued. You know, the lenses I never updated to the orange square ones, and it was just getting long in the tooth, and I didn't want to invest the money to get the new lenses for a system that had been discontinued and really only served one function in my workflow, just in-studio photography. That camera has no IBIS, and you know, you really have to be kind of careful how you use it. It's an older camera. It wasn't a backside illuminated sensor, et cetera, et cetera. But that camera's image output is gorgeous. You know, top 5, you know, color science, all this stuff. I made a video at my top 5 color sciences. So really a great camera. But with the mirrorless revolution in full swing, I thought it was time to at least give you know, mirrorless medium format cameras a try. While the image quality output isn't quite as nice as the H6D, the GFX system's image quality has been good enough, at least for my purposes. I tested against phase 1. It compared very favorably. You know, it compares very favorably to the H6D. I have a whole video about this as well, but I had been adapting Hasselblad lenses to the Fujifilm system with the adapter, the H adapter that Fujifilm makes. But at some point, they changed the software with this GFX 100II series, and the H series adapter stopped working with my Hasselblad lenses. Okay, and again, I have a whole video about that if you want to watch that you know, whole thing. I've given that feedback to Hasselblad I don't know how many times, but it hasn't changed as far as I know. So I ended up selling my old Hasselblad lenses. So even though this camera has been working very capably as my main workhorse medium format, you know, daily driver,
but the gas monster got me.
And when I saw that the X2DII had improved phase detect LiDAR autofocus that I assumed came from DJI, I really wanted to try the X2DII again to see if I could use it as my photography go-to camera and maybe replace the GFX 100 Mark II as my daily driver photography camera. I would probably keep the GFX for video, but then this could be just stay rigged up and just be a video camera because the Eterna is like way overpriced for me. It is so not a camera for me. I would love to play with it, but I just don't need that heavy duty of a cinema camera. So the GFX could like definitely work for my video needs, and then I would use the Hasselblad for photo stuff. So after trying to talk myself out of buying this camera previously, I watched all the YouTube videos that are like clearly made by shell tubers, are definitely marketing things, and like tried to parse out all the, the things that are bad about this camera to talk myself out of it. I ended up not being successful and I bought it anyways. Hasselblad emailed me about a month ago now and said, hey, we have these in stock again. Do you want one? And I answered yes. I actually still had all my lenses from my past attempts at the X2D. I just never got around to selling them or most of them. So I had the lenses and it was just buying the body pretty much. And so that's what I did. And, there's plenty of videos out about the X2D2, its specs and all that stuff. So, if you want me to make a video about that, just kind of reviewing the obvious things that everyone has already talked about, I can. But in the interest of brevity, because these medium format rant videos tend to get long, I tend to get to talking about this topic. I'll just say that the grip material is different. It does look like an elephant's privates. The body's a little darker. I love that they blacked out the logo. That looks slick. And then it feels like they listened to me so much. They fixed the tilt out screen so it goes out and behind the camera, doesn't get blocked by the viewfinder. They put a joystick on. They even added an extra customizable button. Great. Sounds great, right? Well, I'm here to report that, while they fixed some of these things, they didn't fix them all the way. And, the GFX is still probably the more functional camera, okay? What do I mean by that? One, the joystick on the Hasselblad is funky. It only goes up and down and left and right. It doesn't have a diagonal option. So while they gave me the joystick, they didn't give me a fully functional joystick. Very Hasselblad. The buttons are on the screen, not on the body of the camera. So when you tilt the screen up, it's just sort of weird to move between the joystick and the buttons. I'm sure you would get used to that if you shot it more, and maybe I'm just spoiled with using the GFX that does it the other way with the buttons on the side of the screen. But that just feels like a more awkward way to do it, in my mind at least. And then while they improved it, they really didn't fix the EVF lag or the EVF delay. So when you're shooting the camera and you look at the screen and then you bring it up to your eye, especially if you're wearing glasses, it takes a good half of a second to switch between the screen and the EVF. It's a really bad lag. I'll show you here. I'll just do it. So I'm looking at the screen. Now I lift it to my eye, and now I can see the viewfinder. So the fix that I end up doing is I take my thumb and I put it on the sensor and then put the camera up to my eye so the EVF is going as soon as I put it up to my eye. It's a weird thing though. What I've noticed is that if I put the lens cap on and I do this, then it switches almost instantaneously. So it's got to be something with the imaging processing pipeline where it's the processor's too slow, and it's if there's data coming through the lens, the EVF sensor information relay can't handle it. So if you cut out the information and make it all black, it switches pretty fast sometimes. But then as soon as you take the lens cap off and move it, again, you get back into that delay. It's also really sensitive as to where I put the EVF on my eye. Sometimes I just nail it and it switches really fast. And then a lot of the times I miss it or something and it doesn't switch right away. It's so weird and funky and just finicky. But it's still better than before where with the X2D, it was you lift the camera to your eye, it'd be 1, 2, 3, and then it would switch. Here, it's more that it's just finicky, I think, than anything else. So while there is a delay, sometimes there isn't, and it might just be that it's finicky and you just got to kind of nail it just right. But I don't nail it just right all the time. And so it feels like there's still a delay. I'm not sure which one it is. But either way, it's a pain in the butt. Power on and power off time of the X2D is way longer than the Fujifilm. The next thing I'll talk about with the difference between the X2D and the Fuji, where the Fuji compares more favorably, I would say, is autofocus. Even though it is much improved compared to the X2D, the X2D2's autofocus is still pretty slow. It struggles in low light. I don't think the DJI LiDAR stuff works in low light. And it's still just not as fast as the GFX or as confident. So like if you're shooting and you're tracking someone, and you do get tracking now, you didn't get that in the X2D. If you're tracking someone and someone kind of runs in front, the Hasselblad will lose it. And it might be a while before it finds the person again, you know. I'm also not 100% sure that it hits eyes in eye tracking all the time. It's just like a little less confident, so I'm not sure. And then the last thing I'll say, where they they're kind of different and the X2D doesn't compare as favorably, is that like because of the leaf shutter, I think the blackout period is really long. So if you're shooting something like paddle or pickleball, like you saw in the photo samples I had at the beginning of the video, it's really hard to time it right, so you get the ball like in front of the paddle or the racket, right, because of that blackout period. So you kind of like have to like guess at about how long the blackout period is going to be based on your shutter speed, and then you sort of anticipate and click before you actually see the ball hit the racket or whatever. So I got it to work. It's definitely better than the X2D, but it's just not really there that I would feel confident shooting this for sports and things like that. In the studio shooting models, or like in the street shooting a model, something like that, like commercial stuff, it's good enough now. Like it's usable. I felt like the X2D was basically unusable. The autofocus was so bad. This autofocus is usable. It's just not nearly as good as the GFX 100 Mark IIs. Where I would say the X2D kind of excels and is as good or better than the Fujifilm is in several areas. A few things are just fairly obvious right on the surface, right? Like, this is a luxury product. It is sweet. It feels good. It is a nice shooting experience in terms of the feel of the camera. The speed of the camera, the EVF delay, different story, kind of takes away from it. But like the menus are super simple and relatively easy to navigate. Although I still think the menu system is kind of slow to navigate with all these icons and so on. I'm not as strong on how great the menus are, but they're pretty good. They're better than Fujifilm's menus. They make more sense for sure. It also helps they don't have to do video. There's no video in this. So I guess I should mention that too. Like another place that does not compare favorably is that it doesn't have video. The Fujifilm has video. There's that. I do wonder if they're going to put video in the Hasselblad cameras eventually. Like this 90 has a clickable and declickable aperture ring, and the X2D2, unlike the X2D, has a microphone jack. I think it's probably just for a shutter release cable, but it makes me wonder, could you put a headphone in there, for audio, for video? The X1D series had video, just saying. But yeah, just like the hardware level shooting experience is glorious, especially with these lenses that have the focus clutch. Oh man, does that feel good? That's so nice. I love that they have a distance scale on the lenses. I wish more camera companies would do this. This is so awesome. And just like the grip feels really nice. The elephant, underside feels really nice. Like the Fuji, both dials now spin and can push in to do different functions. That feels really good, nice and tactile. The shutter feels good. Man, the click of the leaf shutter is so satisfying, especially with the 90 millimeter. Hang on, I actually can get the 90 millimeter and let you hear. Oh, is that satisfying or what? So good. Another place that it could be argued the X2D2 is better. While the camera only has one CF Express Type B card slot, I would prefer two. It has a terabyte of internal storage, which is really nice. If you forget your memory cards, you've got plenty of space to save photos. And then the last advantage, favorable comparison thing I'll say here is that size-wise, this is considerably more compact than the GFX 100 Mark II. Whoop. This isn't really a fair comparison in terms of lenses because the GFX has a 32-64 on it, and this only has the 90. But you can see they are quite a bit different in size. The X2D is quite a bit smaller. That's also true, generally speaking, of the lenses. This is the 55 for the X2D, and the 55 for the Fuji is about this big and about that tall. It's like not twice the size, but it's pretty darn close, And I would actually say this one renders more nicely, even though it doesn't have the f1.7 that the Fuji one does. In these cases, I would actually rather have the smaller lens. Like f2, f2.5 is all you need in terms of aperture and depth of field for these medium format cameras. So, very smart move on Hasselblad's part. Another thing that occurred to me about the size of the X2DII is that it's about as tall as the GFX 100 RF. And if you look, the X2DII is actually a little bit shorter, if you take out the EVF hump here, right? So, two takeaways there on that point. One is that Fuji could have made this a little bit shorter, but this is about as short as you can make for a camera, I think because of the medium format sensor. It seems like they should have been able to put IBIS in this camera, it being about as tall, and the Hasselblad's maybe a little bit wider, but they're about the same width here. So, Fujifilm probably should have been able to put an IBIS unit in this camera, given the size here. But then I don't think they can go any smaller since they didn't put IBIS in here. Even though they have this tiny lens and all this extra room here, which I think makes the camera look weird, I feel like they should have just made a bigger lens on the camera so it was more proportional and then given us like an f2.5. How much better would this lens look on this camera, especially with the focus clutch, man? Aperture ring here and then a focus clutch. I mean, that would look so much better. And I feel like it would be more proportional too. But since they put this tiny little, like almost X106 lens on it, it looks weird with all this extra space. My dad has said this is like the ugliest camera he's ever seen. He always asks me, did you get rid of that ugly camera yet? But, point here is that like, I don't think that Fuji could have made this much shorter or much smaller just because of the sensor size. B, they should have put a fatter lens with a bigger aperture. I think it would look better and would perform better too. It would make this camera, more versatile and more a camera for more people, I feel like. And then C, it seems like Fuji could make an interchangeable lens, rangefinder style medium format camera pretty easily and have it be about the size of this guy right here. Like just shave the grip off of this and you've got the right size, Move the EVF over like they did on this camera, and you've got about the same size camera. Years before Fuji, Hasselblad had figured out how to make a much smaller medium format camera, and that's really nice. But man alive, if they made an interchangeable lens version of this with little, fun lenses with focus clutches and manual distance scales and aperture rings to go with it, just give me like 2 or 3. A little 55 and then like a really wide one, like a 21 or a 24. Maybe like a portrait lens too, like an 85 or a 110. Oh man, that would be like my perfect system, especially if it was Fuji that has video in it too. Oh man, please Fujifilm, make that camera, please. But anyways, this video is not about the RF, except to say that like this is, something to consider though, is like even though the GFX is way bigger than the Hasselblad, Fuji makes like a little street shooter, travel, portable version of its medium format cameras. So if you wanted a medium format everyday carry camera and wanted to stay in the Fuji system, this exists and you can buy it. And then you can have the bigger camera for your like in studio, commercial jobs, that kind of a thing. And candidly, that's actually how I've been rocking things. The MEV1 from Leica may be changing that, but for right now, that's kind of how I've been doing it. Like if I'm not reviewing cameras or whatever, this is my workhorse, this is my everyday carry camera. And that's been working pretty good, honestly. With the Hasselblad, you don't really have that everyday carry camera option. Like you have the 907X, but that's not really an everyday carry. It's kind of the same camera, just in a different form factor. It's the same size, and the lenses are the same size. So, this is probably actually the better everyday carry option. With the 55, again, it's not that different from the GFX 100 RF. So I would probably just use this as my everyday carry, and you wouldn't need another camera body. But it's not really a perfect everyday carry camera. It's kind of heavy. Another place the Hasselblad kind of doesn't really compare favorably to the Fujifilm is lens selection. Like the Fujifilm has like kind of all your bases covered. They've got awesome tilt shift lenses, although not as nice as the Leica tilt shift lens, but close. They've got telephoto lenses, a 500 millimeter, 250 millimeter, a 110, right? And then they've got all the focal lengths that Hasselblad does offer. Like, they don't have a 90, but they have a 110. That's pretty close. They also have an 80 millimeter, right? They both have a 55, both have something in the 30s, and then Fuji's got a 45 and a 20 something, or like I think it's got a 20 something. Fuji's got a pancake that you can put on the cameras and turn them into an everyday carry camera if you don't want the GFX 100 RF. And then also, I think the bigger thing is that because this has mechanical shutter and not a leaf shutter like the Hasselblad cameras, you can adapt all kinds of stuff. You can adapt Canon EF lenses with autofocus, with aperture control, that stuff. This has all the GFX 100 Mark II, like the Eterna that's coming out, which is another sort of interesting thing. Like Hasselblad doesn't have a cinema camera, I guess. If you put a PL or an anamorphic lens on here, it's got D-squeeze and all those things in the camera already. It's got all the video assist features, although again, this doesn't shoot video, the Hasselblad, so that's not really a thing. But like, it's got all the things that you could use all kinds of lenses. I've got on order, and this is very interesting, I've got on order an adapter that Kip-On just made that should allow me to adapt my Leica S lenses to this, which might mean my Leica S camera body's in trouble. Those lenses aren't going anywhere. If it works on this camera and has decent autofocus, whew. But yeah, point of that is that you can adapt all kinds of lenses to this, so it's a much more versatile system. Again, I just want to put this plug in here. Fuji, please fix your H adapter so I can go buy some orange dot Hasselblad lenses and put it on here. Oh man, if I could put Leica lenses and Hasselblad lenses on here, oh my goodness. On the other hand, you can't really adapt things to this. Because it's leaf shutter, the shutter is in the lens here. And so like when you put adapted lenses on it, and some companies make lens adapters, you get the electronic shutter. And from what I've seen, like basically any kind of light source, except for sunlight, makes this thing band like crazy. So it really, you just can't adapt any lenses and you're locked into the lens system. They're really nice lenses. I will say that like, if you go into Lightroom, because I don't like using like focus, I don't really like it. It's really slow. It doesn't work for me. But like if you go into Lightroom, you don't get lens corrections for these cameras, and you don't really need them for these lenses for the most part. Whereas with these lenses, often you need the lens corrections. They're not as like clean and perfect optically. It's relying on software to make them about as nice as the Hasselblad lenses. But overall, like the GFX has a way larger, both native and adaptable set of lenses that you can use on the camera. So from that perspective, far more versatile. Yeah, in terms of screens, it's sort of a weird thing. Like the Hasselblad has the EVF lag, but then the back screen is gorgeous. And then on the GFX, the back screen is kind of tiny and lackluster, but then the EVF, which has no lag, is gorgeous. I'm more of an EVF shooter, so I prefer this 9-point-something million dot EVF that is just gorgeous. That's like probably more important to me than the back screen, but it would be nice if one of them could have just gotten it right. Give me the awesome EVF and the awesome back screen, Fuji. Hasselblad. And again, just to compare in case it's not obvious, the Fujifilm has way more buttons, 3 customizable buttons up here, 2 here. They put all the buttons on the side here so it doesn't get lifted up to the monitor, which is faster in my opinion. The joystick goes all the normal joystick directions. So overall, like for me, a much faster, more useful control scheme once you get used to it. And once you get used to Fuji's terrible menus, which I'm just used to because I've been using them for so long. I also love this movie still switch in the top. Super tactile, works great. This SCM focus selector on this copy is really good. On some of them, it can be mushy. But overall, I prefer the controls of this. I love the big top screen here, although the little top screen, the Hasselblad, is nice too. Overall, more functional layout on the Fuji, in case that wasn't obvious. Okay, so you could have probably learned all those pros and cons and kind of those comparisons between the two cameras just reading the spec sheets and watching YouTube videos. I assume you're really here for the image quality discussion, okay? Here's the deal. The Hasselblad is kind of like Canon. It has one color profile that it spits out, and it's very pleasing to the eye. It might not be super accurate, but the way they balance the colors is very natural and accurate, and it feels lifelike. What they're doing, I'm pretty sure, is that they're letting their lenses vignette a little bit all the time, even if you have focused lens correcting, it vignettes a little bit, okay? They are lowering the contrast, deepening the shadows, and then putting kind of like a sepia tone, like orangier color onto the images. With the nice rendering of the lenses, this looks really good and has kind of a filmic rendering. And then like the way they do colors is sort of block the colors, as far as I can tell, and they balance those blocks. Like that's all done in camera, but if you like really move a slider fast, sometimes you can see it do it. And so like that's really nice, but then it's hard to get it off of that look. So this is a very pleasing, unique look right out of camera, but like that's kind of the only look this camera does. Maybe it's because I'm like a little just like salty, but I feel like the colors of the H6D and the X1D2, which matched very nicely, were way nicer than this. Like this is a little more saturated. The skin tones are a little more orange. It just looks a little more like oversaturated to me. So I don't love it as much as older Hasselblad cameras. Still super nice, super gorgeous, but not as nice as previous models. And that may be one of the reasons that I'm like not so enthused about this camera, is that the color science, while gorgeous, is not as gorgeous as past cameras. And that really bums me out. And then the Fujifilm, I don't want to say it's kind of like Sony. I don't think that's right. Maybe it's like Nikon. But like the images coming right out of camera are more just like bright and clean and sharp corner to corner. There's not like as much vibe to them, you know? It's just sort of a cleaner image. It's sort of like a flatter plate for you to put your artistic, you know, touches on. I would say the image right out of camera isn't always as pleasing as the X2D. I mean, I will say sometimes like the Fuji color magic comes together, and like it's a beautiful image right out of the camera. Don't get me wrong. It's just not as consistently like wow factor as the X2D. Also, like the white balance is not as accurate often as the Hasselblad. The Fuji gets it wrong more. But if you dial in the white balance, then there's a lot of times where I actually prefer the colors of the Fuji, which was a very surprising result to me. And I've made a video or two about that, so you can go back and look if you want to see what I'm talking about. But I think the way this does color is like sort of like a matrix metering thing, like most digital cameras. I haven't seen that blocking of colors. So it's just like sort of weighting the colors on like a scale, like a darkest to lightest gradiated scale, I think, you know. So sometimes that means that like the overall color balance isn't as natural and might not be as accurate. But like if you were like take like a piece of, you know, like the photo of the actual color and hold it up to the screen, the Fuji might actually be more accurate in a lot of cases, because the Hasselblad's making the image look nice, whereas the Fuji like doesn't do that. It just gives you whatever it saw, you know. But because it's sort of a clean, more like, I don't want to say sterile, but like generic maybe, or just like less like so conformed to one look, it's way easier to change the look of the Fujifilm and sort of customize it to your taste. Maybe it's also because I've been shooting the Fujifilm for so long now. You know, this came out in 2023, still has better autofocus than the X2DII. And like ostensibly, you know, they're going to be coming out with a new one pretty soon. I think, you know, all signs are pointing to Fuji releasing a new processor sometime in 2026 next year. And so ostensibly, even if they didn't have a new sensor to update, they could put the new processor in and make the GFX 100 Mark III even faster. So, you know, the Hasselblad have even more to catch up with. But anyways, because this has been out since 2023, I've had this for like 2 years now, or versions of it. I sold it once and bought it back, and that cost me $1,000. That was a dumb mistake. Thank you, tariffs. But anyways, because I've been shooting it so regularly for so long, I you know, it might be I've just gotten used to the way it looks, and I've gotten used to editing it, and it works for my workflow now. But you know, while I really, really like the X2D's image quality, and like I say, the colors right out of camera are better than the Fuji, generally speaking, I tend to prefer the look I get out of the files from the Fujifilm more. While the colors might not be totally as pleasing, as easy on the eye, it's easier to edit them the way I want. And often there are times when I'm like, wow, I actually prefer the Fuji's colors over the Hasselblad. Also, just like the way the Fuji lenses render, especially the telephoto guys, is very sharp and modern, and that really works for me. And if I want something more vibey and retro, kind of more filmic, then I can adapt softer lenses, right? Like, you know, kind of a theory I'm working on is like you have sharp sensors and sharp lenses and soft sensors and soft lenses, right? And so the Fuji GFX 100 Mark II is for sure a sharp sensor. So, you know, it's nice to have the option of putting sharp lenses like the GFX lenses, but then being able to adapt soft lenses to get that more cinematic look. Here, you're kind of locked into what I would say is like a little bit more of a soft sensor. It's the same sensor, just the way it's tuned. And then most of the lenses are more, they trend more towards the soft end of lenses. So you get like a really nice, pleasing cinematic look. But if you're doing something where you want that sharp, you know, very clean lines, delineating, you know, lots of micro contrast, that kind of a thing, you're kind of out of luck with the Hasselblad. The Fuji, because it's so adaptable, gives you the option to kind of go both ways. So I kind of prefer that, honestly. So kind of a long rambly video here, as I do with my medium format videos. That's just kind of how I roll with these. There's lots to talk about, and it's very nuanced because both of these cameras are so good. You like anyone, if someone just gave you one of these, you are the luckiest duck, right? These are both fantastic cameras, and the image quality coming out of these cameras is like the best that you can get in digital photography outside of phase one. But like these are way more versatile and like way more portable and all that stuff than phase one. Although I will say that the Fujifilm feels more like an out of the studio camera, whereas the X2DII still kind of feels like a studio princess. But for me, kind of what it boils down to is this. The Hasselblad, while it has the better image quality ostensibly, arguably, right out of camera, still kind of just feels like a luxury item. It's a wonderful, gorgeous, fantastic, fabulous feeling experience to shoot this camera, but it still is lacking in a few areas that the Fujifilm kind of does better. I wouldn't say that the Fujifilm provides a luxury experience, and instead, I would say the Fujifilm feels like a tool. It's far more like any other digital camera, except with a bigger sensor. And like compared to full frame, it's slower, but compared to the Hasselblad, it's quite a bit faster, quite a bit more functional in more situations. So for me, I lean towards the GFX 100 Mark II because I actually like the image quality I get out of it better in certain situations, even if it might take a little bit more work. Like this is medium format photography. If I'm taking photos with this camera, I'm editing them no matter what. Like editing on either one is beautiful. It's way better than editing full frame files. The 16-bit colors, are awesome with both cameras. It gives you way more latitude in editing, but I like the way the Fuji files edit a little bit better. And this feels like a tool. And I need a camera this expensive to be a tool, right? I need it to do as many things as possible because I want to use it as much as possible. The fact that this shoots video, has much faster autofocus, has a much wider lens selection, plus is way more adaptable. On top of the fact that I don't really need the leaf shutter, flash sync speeds or anything like that. I'm not trying to overpower the sun with a flash, that kind of a thing. Even though the Fujifilm shutter feels like a clammy handshake and it sounds like a wet blanket slapping against another wet blanket. Overall, this is just a more versatile tool. And again, I might prefer the image quality coming out of it in a lot of situations. So I definitely lean towards the Fuji. And if we're being honest, I think that like a lot of the YouTube content on this camera is skewed because Hasselblad did the very smart thing of giving this camera away, giving it to lots of YouTubers. Like if someone gave this to me, I would totally keep it, but I paid for it and I need to recoup the money out of one of these systems. I can't afford to keep both. It's a wonderful, luxurious shooting experience. And I think that like, that's really skewed things in terms of marketing and market perception, which was really smart on Hasselblad's part, that they gave it to all these YouTubers. So of course the YouTubers are using it. It's a super fun camera to use. It's a lovely experience to use, generally speaking, even if it's a little bit slow, right? But I think if you like gave them a shot of truth serum and like in their heart of hearts, if you ask them, hey, would you use the Hasselblad system if Hasselblad hadn't given you the camera? I think most of them would say no, probably not. They would not spend the money, right? I think that's also why you don't see very much YouTube content about the GFX 100 Mark II is because Fuji didn't give these away and they're freaking expensive. But I will say, like, the few people that on YouTube that do use this love it and they rave about it, right? And I think they don't have to like edit their comments. It's a more genuine commentary because this is a more, more versatile camera. I'll shout out like Samuel Elkins, for example. He does a lot of great content on GFX. And he was given a Hasselblad and does not use it. He went back to his Fujifilm. He like made the couple of Hasselblad videos that required, and then he got back on his Fuji, just say. Okay, so thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. As promised at the beginning of the video, I will now tell you which camera was which in the sample shots stuff that I put at the beginning of the video. Camera A was the Hasselblad. Camera B was the Fuji. So, did you guess right? Could you tell the difference between the two cameras? I'm not sure with YouTube's compression that you'll really be able to tell the difference. In terms of methodology for those sample shots, I just shot RAW and JPEG where there was like a big difference between RAW and JPEG. I tried to like tune the RAW and then exported that. Otherwise, I just used the JPEGs right out of camera. So you could get sort of what the different colors look like right out of camera without me going in editing, even though I said I like to edit the Fuji files more. And hopefully that gives you a flavor of how the two different cameras output files. So Could you tell the difference between the two? You know, did you prefer one over the other? Did you get it right? Did you guess the Hasselblad files were the Hasselblad files and the Fuji were the Fuji files? Or were you like me and like couldn't really tell and maybe even mixed it up? In some cases. Have you tried both of these cameras? Was there anything I missed that I should have talked about? Have you not tried them and you're curious about something? Let me know. Like I said, I'm leaning towards the Fuji, so I'm probably going to sell the Hasselblad. So ask quick if you have any questions. And then, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.